Nike is bringing their flagship technologies from the Vaporfly into a trail shoe with the Ultrafly. So is this a Vaporfly of the trail or just a souped up peg trail? Well, after a few runs, I'm ready to give you my first impressions. Just a quick disclaimer that I did buy this with my own money. Nike did not send it to me, so like all my reviews, all my thoughts and opinions are my own. But anyways, let's get into the specs. The stack height is 38mm in the heel, 29.5 in the forefoot with an 8.5mm drop. The weight for men's size 9 comes in at 10.1 ounces and a price of $260. And I put this in the super trail shoe category. Alright, now let's see what's new in the shoe overview. The upper uses vaporweave material with a midfoot band to help keep you nice and locked in. The midsole is full ZoomX with a carbon fly plate sandwiched in there. And the outsole is full coverage of Vibram Mega Grip rubber with 3.5mm lugs. Now talking about the fit of the shoe, I got my typical men's size 12, which is what I am in the Ultrafly and pretty much all of the Nikes except for the Vaporfly, which I do wear a 12.5 in. Anyways, I thought that the length was perfect in the size 12. However, the shoe in general just seems to have a pretty shallow toe box, like there's not a lot of volume in there. I thought the heel counter was kind of high, especially with these kind of pokey corners. It seemed to poke and rub on my Achilles if I wasn't wearing high enough socks and cause some blistering. That doesn't really have anything to do with the fit, but thought I'd just throw that in here. Anyways, overall, I think it's true to size, but just be cautious of that volume of the toe box. Now let's talk about the ride and my first impressions of the Ultrafly. So this shoe, like I said, uses ZoomX and a fly plate in there, and it does have a slight rocker. The rocker isn't as aggressive as it is on the Vaporfly, but it still helps give you a nice smooth heel-to-toe transition. So that full ZoomX midsole and the fly plate work well together to give you a very smooth and energetic and surprisingly stable ride. Unless they changed it last minute, I do believe that the fly plate is forked in the forefoot as well, which seems true because it didn't seem as rigid as it does in the Vaporfly. The ZoomX is wrapped in this material that's reminds me of athletic tape, and this is to help protect the fragile midsole, so if you're running against rocks or roots, it's not going to take chunks out of your midsole, and so far I've seen seems to be protecting it decently well. So I did try out a few different trail types with this shoe, and I even did road to trail in the shoe, so I'll talk about my experiences with those. First off, I just want to talk about this outsole, the Vibram rubber. Despite the lugs not being super aggressive, only at 3.5mm, I found that they gripped really well on all the surfaces I tried this shoe out on. So the first run out of the box that I took these shoes on was a road to trail, so I took a bike path to my local gravel canal trail, and I did some pickups on that trail, and the kind of low profile lugs felt right at home on the road. They didn't seem to get in the way. It felt pretty much like a normal road shoe, and they felt right at home on the gravel. I wasn't slipping or sliding at all, and then when I was picking up the pace, I could feel some of that more energetic bounce from that midsole and the plate. When I took this on some hilly single track, I thought that the forefoot traction was really nice when I was on my toes going up the hills, and then when I was going on those descents, I really noticed that protective cushioning in the heel from the ZoomX, and also the grip was good back there as well. I wasn't sliding around at all. So the upper did keep me locked in nicely, especially around this midfoot here. It did a good job also of keeping out dust and debris. It does have that vaporweave material like we've seen on the Vaporfly Next% 1, but the downside to that is it isn't super breathable, so when I ran in like 90-degree weather, hot days, my feet were very, very warm in this shoe. One more thing I wish that this upper had was a toe bumper. It doesn't really have much protection up here, so if you're running on super rocky trails and you stub your toe on a rock, that's gonna hurt since there's not much protection here. Overall, I think that this ZoomX midsole in the plate did a good job of being protective, protecting you against rocks, and also being very cushioned for long miles. And unlike other ZoomX shoes, it was pretty stable despite going over uneven terrain. Alright, I'm going to do a couple of quick comparisons. The first shoe I'm going to compare the Ultrafly to is the Vaporfly. So, like I said, these two have a lot in common in the sense of midsole materials. They both have ZoomX and a fly plate, but that's kind of where these similarities end. These two are very different shoes overall. The Vaporfly is designed to be super lightweight, super minimal for racing on the road, so that upper is going to be super breathable and minimal. The midsole is going to have that super aggressive rocker and that firm plate. It's going to have a pretty thin base there, and that's all contrary to the Ultrafly that has that more durable protective upper, that less aggressive rocker, and that wider base to be more stable. And all this rubber too makes it a much heavier shoe. But I don't want a Vaporfly of the Trail per se. Like, I don't want this shoe to have a super aggressive rocker or to have that skinny base to it when I'm running on trails. I want it to be a little milder rocker and definitely want it to be much more stable. So I think that's a good thing there. It does carry over some of that feel. You get that nice energetic bounce and some propulsion, but it isn't. If you're looking for essentially a Vaporfly with a Vibram outsole, that's not what this is. It is trying to translate some of the things you like about the Vaporfly to a nice trail shoe. The next shoe I'm going to compare the Ultrafly to is the Nike Pegasus Trail 4. So both of these are great all around kind of road to trail shoes in my opinion, because they don't have super aggressive lugs. Anyways, the kind of main differences between these shoes are gonna be in the midsole. The Pegasus Trail has 4mm less stack. It is lighter than the Ultrafly. It does have longer lugs, and the Ultrafly has 4mm instead of 3.5, but it doesn't have a plate and doesn't use ZoomX. It uses a React midsole, and it does have a more substantial upper as well. I've used the Peg Trail on the same type of trails that I've run the Ultrafly on, and I'd say they both handle them pretty well. I did a 10-mile trail race in the Peg Trail last year and thought that it did great. Didn't notice the weight too much at all, and it did great gripping up and down the ascents and descents. So I do think that the Ultrafly would have handled this 10-mile trail race pretty much the same. I would have been welcomed to that plate for some protection from the rocks, and that ZoomX midsole for some of that energy return towards the end of the race, but I do like the more comfortable upper on the Pegasus Trail. Overall, I think that these are both good trail options. I think that the Peg Trail is definitely much more affordable and is kind of a better all-around option. However, the Ultrafly is going to give you that more premium kind of race-ready experience. But again, if you're expecting this to be a Vaporfly of the Trail, I don't think that's accurate. I do think that kind of calling it a Pegasus Trail Ultra is kind of more in line here. So overall, I think that the Ultrafly is a super premium trail shoe. You get that kind of race day ready experience with that ZoomX foam and that plate. And I think that this Vibram outsole with the 3.5mm lugs works great for my local trails here in Colorado that are pretty dry and dusty. But if you live in a wetter climate and have muddy trails, I don't know how well this shoe is going to hold up for you. I think you're just going to be slipping and sliding around there. But for me, I've been using this a lot for everyday runs and just trail runs in general, even, like I said, some road to trail. And when doing some hill repeats and pickups, I liked that more snappy feel to it. But just for long runs on the trails, that cushion is welcomed as well. Again though, this shoe isn't as light and fast and snappy as its road brother, but it does share some of that Vaporfly DNA, but it's definitely a true trail shoe. So I have more miles to put on the shoe before I give you my final verdict in the full review. Subscribe so you don't miss that, and as always, keep on running.